afternoon, good evening, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls from across the globe. We welcome you into our homes this evening. Thank you for joining us for yet another and one of our last off-season pods here at Backyard Buckets, presented by Backyard Sports. I got my man Gary, the ambassador of Quan, in his house. What's up, dude? Talk to me.
Yeah, getting excited, man. You said it, right? One of the last off-season episodes. We're getting close. We're getting close to preseason basketball, and then soon after that, man, we're tipping off the regular season. So excited to
Yes, we are.
see when camps open up and stuff, right? When we start to really see what teams are going to try to do and how they're going to set their rosters, but also I want to see what Vic does, man. I know it's kind of cliche because he was the number one pick, but I am really curious to see when we get to preseason games that you've got vets playing minimal minutes, but you've got vets playing and see how he stacks up and how we progress into the regular season.
Yep. Yeah. It's an exciting time. What's up, Dad?
Yeah.
It is an exciting time to be an NBA fan, that is for sure. Maybe not at this exact moment, but we're getting closer. We're inching there.
We're almost there, man. We're almost
Yes.
there.
If only we had some other sport to hold us over until basketball
Right,
season.
right.
I just can't think of
such
any.
a dull month.
Yeah. All right. So this evening we're gonna hit on a couple of headlines. We're gonna talk some potential moves that we've mentioned before, but there's been some developments, right, with Damian Lillard and with Giannis Antetokounmpo. Not as much with James Harden, although he will probably play a factor into some things we discuss later. And then we're gonna do another a division preview, right? We're doing as Gary called them, the Metropolitan Division.
The equivalent in hockey.
Yes, the equivalent in hockey. As for the rest of us who know ball, they are the Atlantic Division.
Yeah.
But that's all right. We won't hold that against you. For those of you who don't know who those teams include, that would be your Boston Celtics, your Philadelphia 76ers, your New York Knicks, your Brooklyn Nets, and your Toronto Raptors. Some teams that have been movers and shakers in the past, and we'll get into their off seasons here in a little bit. Before we do that, Gary, I would like to speak about Damian Lillard.
Yeah.
We've talked about him quite a bit on this pod, specifically in the offseason stuff, right? We know that he wants to play in Miami. There were rumors that his agent was contacting other teams saying, hey, don't call Portland about me or about Dame, rather, because he's not going to show up to your teams. Well, he kind of doubled down on that this past week, right? He said, I only want to go to Miami. If I am traded somewhere else, I will not show up to that team, and I will request a trade from that team to the Miami Heat. Gary, do you feel that for someone who has been touted for being such a loyal player to the Pacific Northwest for so long, for about, 11 years, I think he's been in the league now, do you feel that he's kind of losing some of the goodwill with the fan base there?
Yeah, unfortunately, it sucks that it's come down to this, but you've got kind of a clash of, I guess, Titan mentalities, right? Portland is being very rigid in its demands for Dame. And to be honest, I think they're justified in doing so. They've tried, right, to build around him. They've just made the wrong moves. It happens. It was like LeBron's first stint in Cleveland. They tried. Nobody can say Dan Gilbert didn't try to build around LeBron, and they can't say that Portland didn't try to build around Dame. They've been through several head coaches. They've been through a couple of GMs in the time he's been there. They've tried to make moves, trades. They've tried to get some free agents in. They made the move for Melo even at one point, thinking that one more scorer might help. But yeah, he is losing some shine. But also from his perspective, right? I guess if he wants out, he wants out. And players have a lot of power in the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
More so than any other sport, really. Maybe baseball can rival it a little, but not to the level that the NBA players have. So it sucks. It sucks. And I've kind of looked at this akin to like John Elway and Eli Manning in the NFL and how badly they were looked upon when they first came into the leagues, because they did it as rookies. They said, don't draft me. I'm not playing for you. People forget Bo Jackson also did that. He actually got drafted by the Buccaneers. He said, nope, I'm going to go play baseball. So it's one of those things, he knows what he wants. And whether or not we think it's the right move for his career, it's what he wants. It sucks though, because you nailed it perfectly, right? He had a lot of good faith. He's kind of a, hero, I guess, up there in the Pacific Northwest. And it feels like this may not tarnish it, but at least take some of the shine off of what he did there for over a decade.
Yeah, absolutely. I told you this earlier, but somebody made the joke on Twitter that Dame was the most loyal player to the city of Portland, and now he's the most loyal player to the city of Miami, even though he doesn't play there yet. Yeah.
Yeah, that can be true in a lot of ways, right? From the team perspective, right? Because teams very much the stars, right? They want to keep them in town. Football, everybody's a lot more expendable, with some exceptions, right? The quarterback position for the most part. But teams, the NFL, there's almost no loyalty to players in the NFL.
Yep.
Very much a what have you done for me lately? We're gonna move on.
Yep.
Basketball, you have a lot more longevity too, though, so it's easier to say, like, if I stick with a guy for 10 years, he's going to be around for 10 years. He's not going to have the high impact injuries you get in the NFL.
For sure. So again, a topic that we have talked about. We did this with the over under pod. I believe we left Miami off the list.
Yeah.
And I'm not asking so much about the numbers, right, of games that they're going to win or games that they're going to play. Do you view Dame playing in Miami? We'll say sans Tyler Hero, because that's kind of the only move they have, right? Is if they're going to make a move, right, it's going to be without Tyler Hero. So supplement Tyler Hero for Damian Lillard. Is that a playoff contender, right? Obviously, they would probably make the playoffs, but is that a championship contending team there with Damian Lillard in Miami?
It's hard from this perspective because, in all fairness to Miami, they were in the finals last year, right? Like, This is a team that was in the finals last year. But we all kind of know that was a bit of a goofy run, right? Giannis got hurt. They got some lucky bounces. The Celtics, I still think if Tatum doesn't get hurt at the beginning of Game 7, they finish the first 3-0 comeback in NBA history. We've seen it in other sports, but not in the NBA. I just look at it and I say, am I a believer that Miami, with Tyler Hero, is a finals contender this year, right? Because they stayed pretty pat. Draft, they got maybe a chip that can help them early. He's got a lower ceiling, but he can help them early.
Yeah.
But I don't see it.
Don't forget, they didn't have Tyler Hero in the playoffs last year.
It's fair, right? That was, and I even said it at the time that I thought the Tyler Hero injury was probably more impactful to Miami than Giannis was to Milwaukee. I was wrong in a lot of ways because they were able to kind of grind it out and win that series. But I did think that Hero was pretty impactful for them. I just think it was such a weird run last year that I'm not ready to say, like, Miami's atop the East even with Dame. And I love Dame. I love him. I know most basketball fans do because he's exciting, the way he plays, who he is. It's the air about him, how he is with fans, how he is with the media even. I don't look at that and say, yep, Miami's going to win the East now that they got Dame, especially if they're losing Hero. Because I think Hero was coming into his own down the stretch of last season.
Yeah.
Without that hand injury, I think he was going to make a splash in the playoffs and really make his presence known. But I'm curious your thoughts. Do you think that Miami's a contender now? Assuming this trade ends up going through. Because I think it's going to have to at some point. Portland's not going to sit with Dame Lillard on the bench for 6 weeks of the season, right? They're going to make a move and they're going to make something happen soon. Do you think they're a contender if they add Dame?
Yeah, I lean to no, right? I know that's probably the safe pick, and you can't, and not every team can be a contender. But along with potentially losing Tyler Hero in this trade, they also lost Gabe Vincent and Max Strus, right? Who were two guys that played a ton of minutes for them down the stretch in the NBA Finals, as we saw last year against Denver. Those are guys that I don't know how they're going to replace that production. Obviously, you're going to get a ton of production from Dame. He's an elite level scorer. He's an all NBA point guard, right, when he's healthy. So they're going to get a boost at the point guard position from Gabe Vincent to Dame. However, is Dame going to buy in on defense? Is he going to make the rotation? Is he going to close out on the corner? Is he going to be the guy to do all those things that Gabe Vincent did so willingly in that Miami system? I just don't see it. He's going to be 34, I believe, going into this year. I know that everyone's in shape in Miami. I got it. The sun, the beach, cool. Everyone kind of lives forever down there. Understood. But I I have never seen that from Dame, from him to be a committed, locked-in defender. And you mentioned it. It was a goofy run through the playoffs last year. Jimmy Butler was kind of up and down with his scoring nights, right? He had some historic games, but the one constant that Miami had throughout the entire playoff run last year was effort. They played harder than every other team on the court every other game, it seemed like. And I don't know that Dame has the steam to do that through. We'll give him 65 games next year, right? If he ends up playing a full season,
And
we'll
then
give
in
him
the playoffs.
65 games and another 25 games in the playoffs, right?
Yeah.
Or however many it runs out to.
And
I
the thing you gotta think about too, you
Mhm.
said it perfectly, right? It's effort, but it's on both ends of the floor, right? I
Yes.
think we know Dame is a guy who can get his own on the offensive end with the best of them, but
Yes.
it's the other end of the floor, and that end of the floor drains you,
Mhm.
right? And that's always been the thing that the guys did it to Steph. They tried to do it to Jordan. They did it to Kobe. They do it to LeBron a lot. You make them work on the other end, and you take their legs out from under them on the offensive end, right? You make them tired, and then they can't be the guy that dominates you on the other end. If Dame buys in, you said it, steam. Does he have the steam to do that for 65 plus however many games, like 20, 25 games in the playoffs, depending on the run? I don't think so. I don't think
Yeah.
so. And it could be an issue, right? And I don't know how Jimmy's going to take that because he's a guy that wants to be that junkyard dog that battles on both ends of the floor. Whether he's being successful on offense or not, he's still going to battle on the defensive end with anybody in the league. So
For sure.
whether that comes to a head, I don't know. I know they're good friends, right? So that goes a long way, right? But when you're in the heat of the battle in March and April and playoff seeding is on the line and you're getting ready to start your playoff run or whatever, those tempers can flare a little bit.
They can. I would give a little bit of pushback just to the. I don't disagree with the fact that Dame probably doesn't have it to play defense all year long. I would give a slight pushback to what you mentioned there with playoff seeding. I think with the way that the NBA is played today and the way that teams can fill it up so well on offense, I think that seeding matters a little less than it used to.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. I agree.
But that would be the only pushback I have for your statement there. Everything else I totally agree with.
Yeah.
I think that Miami specifically probably cares a little less about seeding than do other teams because they have that Miami mentality of we can go into anybody's house and beat anybody on their own court, right?
Well, that's a great point. And maybe it doesn't come to a head until game 6 of a playoff series and you're down 3-2, something like that.
Who knows?
Right?
Who knows?
But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Seeding, maybe that's kind of the old guy in me that playoff seeding used to matter so much in basketball. It used to matter so much in every sport. Now it's honestly in like almost all the major sports. Maybe baseball is the one that it still matters.
Yeah.
I don't think teams care as much in a lot of the sports. They care more about having their studs on the court, studs on the field. Yeah. So they do a lot of the load management, a lot of resting down the stretch. So you're right. You're right. That seeding probably isn't where it's going to come to a head. Maybe it's playoffs and you're down 3-2 and Dame's taking a couple of plays off on the defensive end.
Yeah, potentially. Who knows? I mean, I guess we could see it play out in real time, and I'm very excited for that.
Yeah, for sure.
But
those personalities too, it's going to be fun to watch. If they do end up on the same team, those two personalities can be a lot of fun to watch.
A lot of accountability there.
Oh yeah.
So we mentioned seeding. So we're going to talk about another player who has very much cared about seeding because he's always, the one or two. We talked about effort. This player has never lacked in effort. If anything, it's maybe his biggest quality.
Yeah.
And that would be none other than Giannis Antetokounmpo. And you and I were on this very pod not 3 weeks ago, I think. And I brought up the storyline of him sort of hinting to the media that, hey, if Milwaukee is not moving in a winning direction, it would be malpractice of me to not explore other options. Well, Giannis has doubled down on that statement this week, and he has gone to the front office. He has circumvented using the media to send a message, and he has gone to his bosses and said, hey, feel free to trade me if you think that it would work out best for both parties. This coming on the heels of an article I read saying that the Knicks, who famously drafted his brother, maybe not famously, but I told the people here that they drafted his brother.
Yeah, we brought it up on the podcast.
Yes.
It's famous.
There was an article outlining all of the things that the Knicks had and could put in an offer to Milwaukee to bring the second best player in the world to the city.
Yeah.
Gary, do you think that would be the best move for Giannis?
I'm gonna relate this back to the Carmelo trade to New York, because when you make a trade like this, especially late in an off season or mid season, right? Those two time frames really hinder the team's ability to build around you in order to compete in that given season, right? So taking out what we're going to see down the road, if Giannis ends up making kind of this trade happen, I think that he's gonna set himself up for failure, because what the Knicks are gonna have to get up to get, like you said, the second, third best player in the world. At times, you could argue he was the best player in the world over the last handful of years. You're gonna lose, like we talked about it earlier. You're probably gonna lose RJ. You're probably gonna lose 4 or 5 picks over the next couple of years. You're adding maybe 2 more starters. You might end up with like Brunson as the last guy standing with Giannis, and maybe you keep like a Mitchell Robinson, and then you're talking like how do we fill out this roster, right? We saw this not work with the Brooklyn Nets. So I don't think the Knicks have to look very far to understand we better know what we're getting into if we're going to do this, because we've seen it from our neighbors right up the road, not able to build around stars that they went and traded all their assets away for. And they got multiple stars on trades, but they, of course, gave up tons and tons of assets. So do I think it's the best move for Giannis? No, because I look at what Milwaukee has done, and I'm a little confused of like what he's seeing from them that he doesn't like necessarily to kind of bring this about. Maybe he sees like status quo isn't good enough, I guess, is what I have to think. But they've done a ton over the last 4 years, 5 years. I wonder still if losing Bud was a big deal for him, because they famously had a very, very good relationship. And I think the front office maybe made that move without consulting. It maybe that's part of this. I'm just speculating. It's conjecture at this point, but I just look at it and I think, like, what is it that's got him thinking this way? Because I think Milwaukee's done everything they can in their power, really, to build around him, put players around him that make him successful. He's had tons of success. They've won tons of games. I just think that, he wants championships, but it's hard to win a fucking NBA championship, man.
Yes,
It's so hard. And you get nicked up in the playoffs. You're their best player. You get nicked up in the playoffs. They've lost their best player. You get eliminated. We lost our best player for a good majority of that series. So, and the team that beat us went on to the NBA Finals. So maybe it's a combination of those things that he's just like letting some doubt creep into his mind. Maybe I wouldn't have expected this from him, though, because he's been so just very, very forthcoming, but also very true and very transparent. And this feels not that.
Right.
But no, to answer your question, long answer, I don't think so, because I think what he's got in Milwaukee, they've tried to build for him to be successful. If he goes to New York, you're looking at 2 years of attracting free agents. And we've seen New York isn't the destination it's been in the past for free agents. We've had guys go there and try to bring other guys in, and they don't end up going to New York. Jim Dolan's a fucking turd, so a lot of people don't want to play for him. But I also think the money is just as good in a lot of places in the NBA now. You don't have the media market doesn't make as much of an influence. So it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard if he goes to New York, losing all those assets and then having to build around him this late, especially like this late in the offseason.
Yeah.
Oof.
So I kind of think of this in two different veins, right? There's the vein of what does Giannis think is the best move for himself. Yeah, the home field advantage in longer series, I agree, does not matter
Yep,
as
for
much
sure.
as the one game.
Yep.
But all right, so taking this from two different approaches, right? Giannis, does he think the best move for him is to go to New York? I think that ultimately the best move for him will be to move somewhere. I don't know that New York is the place. You did mention that nobody really wants to play for Jim Dolan. The money doesn't really matter as much anymore. With the salary cap going up, he's going to get probably the biggest contract ever,
Yep.
right? We'll talk about the current one in a little bit. But
marketing is so international now.
yes,
You're not marketing to New York City anymore. You're not marketing to Los Angeles anymore. You're marketing to a global market.
exactly. Being on the front page of the New York Times is not what it used to be, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that eventually Giannis will move. I don't know where. I don't necessarily think that New York is the best move for him, but it would be the most exciting move, I think, for basketball as a whole, right? The other side of the argument, or the thought project here, is Milwaukee. Milwaukee is the one that Giannis gave permission to seek a trade, right? Giannis didn't go to them and request one. He said, if you think that the best decision here is to move me, then I'm cool with that.
That's so passive aggressive.
Right? So I think that we saw a move similar to this last year, right? When Kyrie got traded away from Brooklyn.
Yep.
Kyrie traded away Brooklyn traded away Kyrie, and they got kind of a king's ransom back for him, right? Now they have kind of this hodgepodge, and we're going to talk about them as well in our preview. They kind of have this hodgepodge of characters on their roster that nobody really knows what they're going to do, right? Nobody's sure how they're going to play out, if they're going to move these guys. They have a bunch of cap room. Nobody knows for sure what's going to happen. I think that Milwaukee is going to use this year's Brooklyn team as kind of a litmus test of if we move a superstar and get a king's ransom back, where does that leave our franchise? Are we able to rebuild instantly through draft capital and shifting players around, or do we have to tank and go into a full system reboot, right? So I think it was interesting that Giannis gave the team permission, knowing full well that there's kind of a case study going on currently with shipping out a star player and getting back a full ransom, to see how that works out, and if that ownership group is happy enough or satisfied enough with what they see out of Brooklyn, if they could survive something like that, shipping out a superstar talent to get players back and get capital back. So I think this would be a super interesting story going forward, right? We talked about Dame, player empowerment. If a star wants to move, he's going to get moved. But I just think it's interesting that Giannis has not demanded a trade, but rather has given permission for the team to do what they think is best going forward. And I don't think it'll happen this year, right? They made a bunch of signings. Ryan and I talked about it last week on the pod. They brought back a bunch of guys. They made some acquisitions. Like, this team is set for success right now. They're probably going to be a 1 seed in the East again. I mean, they're going to be a great team, provided, again, we're not forecasting injuries. We're only we're forecasting healthy rosters here. This team is going to be great again this year. They probably could win a championship, but it will be interesting next summer to see how this goes.
Yeah. So let's assume they don't win a championship and it's next off season. Where do you think is the best fit for a guy like Giannis?
Oh man, can I say San Antonio? Is that allowed?
Yeah.
I say San Antonio.
Yeah. I could see that certainly being it. I think, one, Pop is so good with international players. 2, Pop is really good with superstar personalities. And 3, assuming, right, that Vic is who Vic is advertised to be, imagine putting that guy on the perimeter running pick and rolls with another guy who's a fucking freak, right?
Yep.
That'd be a great fit for sure.
And they'll have the draft capital to send back because they're probably not going to be very good this year.
Yeah, right. You're this season is all about Vic, right? Is he going to be the guy, and then we'll figure it out from there. So they could have a lottery pick to trade, and plenty of draft capital down the road as well. So I could see him making a run with maybe a LeBron or maybe the Warriors or something along those lines, like a last hurrah run with one of those kind of fading dynasties or fading superstars.
Yeah.
I don't know the fit is great with the Warriors, but I think the fit would be all right there in LA, assuming LeBron and AD are still paired together there. I think you put that much length and that much athleticism on the floor, that'd be fucking wild, wouldn't it?
Nobody would score.
Assuming AD will play games in the playoffs, but
yeah, sure.
Yeah, nobody can compete with that kind of size and athleticism. But I think it'd be really interesting because I think if they don't win a title this year, we could see him chase.
Probably.
And maybe start to force his way out and start to kind of say, hey, I want to go here and play with so-and-so, right?
He's going to – at some point, he's going to have to look at salary cap, too, to see where he's going to be able to fit because he's going to want another deal.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
He just is.
Yep. He's got a huge player option for 25-26 as well, so definitely something to consider.
All right. Let's shift again, get into our division preview. Again, we are doing the Atlantic Division. Celtics, Sixers, Knicks, Nets, and Raptors. All right, so the way this is going to go, I got the teams in front of me. I got kind of their big ticket transactions from the offseason. I have their projected starting lineups going into next year, and then I will ask Gary the question of the evening: splash or trash their offseason. Are you ready? All right, Gary, let's kick this thing off. Celtics. Last year, they finished 57-25. They won this division kind of going, I'd say going away, but not really. So they drafted Jordan Walsh, number 38 overall, player out of Arkansas with alopecia. Love that dude.
Yeah.
They traded away Marcus Smart, who's been a stable person in that organization for many years. He's now in Memphis. As a part of that deal, I believe it was a multi-team deal, they acquired none other than Kristaps Porzingis, a player that you and I know very well. They also traded away Grant Williams to Dallas for draft considerations. They signed a player that I wish Ryan was here to explain to us who this is, but somebody named Delano Blanton. one of the players. Yes, one of Ryan's guys. And then probably the most controversial, maybe not controversial to some people, but the biggest ticket item they did this offseason was they signed Jaylen Brown to the largest NBA contract ever, clocking in at 5 years, $288 million, I believe, with $18 million of incentives. Yeah. So bring it to what, 306, I believe is what it was, 305 and some change. Yeah. So they're projected.
Timing really is everything.
Yes, absolutely. So with that being said, projected starters going into next year: Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Porzingis, and then I kind of have a coin flip between Al Horford and Rob Williams. Yep. It's going to be one of those guys at the 5. It may be KP at the 5, and then somebody else playing the 4.
Flexibility to match up lineups. Yeah.
Did I miss any moves that you can think of off the top of your head?
No, I think you got them. Got them.
So the time has come. Do you splash or trash this offseason?
I'm going to assume health.
Yes.
And I'm going to kind of come off of a little. I gave the trade of Marcus Smart some flack because I really like what he brought to this team. I really like what he brings to Memphis, not necessarily from a fill the bucket aspect, but from leadership, from, you mentioned it, stabilizing. He's been kind of their voice and a gritty guy that can get you a bucket late in the shot clock when you need it. But the upside of KP, assuming he plays 60 games in the regular season and assuming he's there for your playoff run, I do think this team got better. Probably miss Grant Williams, but, I think the KP upside covers up a lot of what you lose there with some of his shooting ability and some of his versatility. I think KP brings that. I do want to say, like, kids, when your coach is yelling at you to make sure you dribble with both hands, I guess you don't have to, right? Jaylen Brown is a fucking shining example of $300 million. He can't dribble with his fucking left hand. But I do like the combination of Brown and Tatum when you can keep them both on the floor at the same time. That's been a little bit of a challenge at times for them over the last couple of years. I think they mesh well together with their style of play. I think that Derek White is underrated in his role for this team. And I'm gonna stick to it with KP with the upside that he brings. Size, a guy that can defend the rim. He's not what he was when he first came into the league, but he can give you some defense around the rim. He's athletic enough to defend on the outside, right on the perimeter. Not as quick as he was when he came in the league, right? We all know that when you get those leg injuries, you're going to slow down a step. But what he can do on the offensive end, as versatile as he can be on the offensive end, I see it as an upside for them, a bump and upside for them. And I also look at it and say Al Horford is not the guy he was 2-3 years ago, who could give you that kind of three ball and then go rebound and play a little bit gritty on the defensive end. He's not that anymore. You get that back with KP, and I think they missed that a bunch in the playoffs, especially against the Heat. When they lost the Heat there. I like it. I like their offseason. I've kind of done almost a 180 on this. I was a little bit down on it when they made the trade initially, but as the dust has settled, I've convinced myself that I think KP is a good move for them.
Yeah.
What about you, man? You like their offseason?
I do. I'm going to splash the offseason. My favorite move of this offseason from them was an addition by subtraction move. I think that shipping Marcus Smart out of there and increasing the role and minutes for Derek White, big for them. Derek White is a better player than both Malcolm Brogdon and Marcus Smart.
Mm-hmm.
For so many games late in the shot clock, late in the fourth quarter, where Marcus Smart just found the ball in his hands. And it's like, dog, you have two of the 15 best players in the NBA on your roster. Why do you have the ball? You should be passing them the ball. Derek White can do that.
Yep.
Derek White is also a better scorer than Marcus Smart. And facilitator. The only thing he doesn't do better is play defense, and he's not a bad defender.
Yeah.
I want to like the Jaylen Brown deal. I want to. I understand why you give it to him.
Yeah.
You have to. Yeah. You don't have a choice, right?
You got it fenced in.
Yeah, like your choice was to trade him for Dame.
Yeah.
And then we know how that's going to go, right?
And then you would have to trade Dame to Miami again.
Yeah, and then you just get worse, right? Jaylen Brown's a very good basketball player. You mentioned that he can't dribble with his left hand. That's a problem. He had 22 turnovers in the Eastern Conference Finals or something like that. I mean, it does rear its ugly head every once in a while that he's limited offensively. Takes a lot of contested jumpers, but they seem to go in. It's just kind of wild to me.
Yeah.
I like this team. I think under another year under Joe Mazzulla Montana will definitely help them. He might learn how to call a timeout. I don't know. But I think they did get better. Again, projecting health. I love the Porzingis fit there. I think it's going to be huge for them. It offers a lot of lineup flexibility.
Yeah.
They can play Brogdon and Derek White at the same time and then run KP at the 5 against smaller lineups. Like I do think this team's going to be really good next year.
Yeah. I like that last point you made before the roundup. Joe Mazzulla, I think he was dealt a tough hand last year, not having the off season to himself, right?
Yep.
You get comfortable in those scenarios of clock management when you've got an opportunity to teach that and practice it. During the regular season, they're not practicing. They go and they do shoot arounds. They work on a couple of things, and they're getting work in, right? They're not running, last 30-second situations and stuff like that very often, because that's high intensity stuff that you're trying to give guys less of that, right? With load management, especially, not trying to push guys to the brink and in practice. I do think that an off season for him could make a big difference in how he manages in game, for sure. That was a problem for them last year.
Absolutely. They didn't have a lot of side out of bounds or under the basket sets either. Like a full offseason cures a lot of that.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. So we both splashed the Celtics offseason. Moving down our list, we will land in the city of brotherly love. The Philadelphia 76ers last year, second in the division, only 3 games back. They finished 54-28. Probably their most notable move was hiring Nick Nurse to be the head coach of this team. This is also a team that is hard to predict because of the James Harden scenario.
Yeah.
Nobody's entirely sure what's going on there. That's unfortunate. We'll just kind of have to talk around that here, I guess. Some of their moves, right? Daniel House, exercise player option, 1 year, $4.3 million. They signed Mo Bamba. Shout out Brandon. They signed Pat Bev to a 1-year deal. They did match an offer sheet from Utah for center Paul Reed for 3 years and $23.5 million. Get the bag there, B-ball
Yeah.
Paul.
Yeah.
They signed Azuolas Tubelis, Pac-12 stud from Arizona last year, even though as my national title pick, they lost on the first weekend. So
yeah,
that sucks for me. They signed Ricky Council IV and Traquavion Smith to 2-way deals. They signed Montrezl Harrell to a 1 year, $3 million deal. They also signed Danny Green to a 1 year, $3 million deal to come back to Philadelphia. I actually like that a lot for him. Projected starting lineup next year: James Harden, Tyrese Maxey, Tobias Harris, PJ Tucker, and the MVP Joel Embiid. Gary, splash or trash this offseason for not the Knicks, the Sixers.
Before I get into this, I have a question for you because it always astounds me. Like, who would have put money on at the beginning of his career that PJ Tucker would be starting on an NBA roster? What's he, 14 years in now? 15 years in?
Yeah, at least.
Who would have had him starting for a contending franchise too? Right. Like, let's not get it twisted. The Sixers are one of the 3-4 teams in the East that you would talk about as potentially representing the East, especially if they can figure out the Harden thing and keep him around, because I think that's the best move for them, for both sides.
Right.
But I'm really indifferent on the Sixers offseason. I lean a little bit toward trash only because of the drama surrounding James Harden.
Mm-hmm.
The fallout between him and the franchise, especially the front office, that was weird to me. And then the whole weird complaint about like pizza day and stuff, it just got super strange this offseason. So I think they did a good job of maintaining and a little bit maybe even improving on roster construction with some of the little pieces. I love the Reed re-signing to match that offer sheet. I thought he really made maybe not a splash, but at least made everybody pay attention to the fact that he can play.
Yeah.
In the postseason, especially. Harrell, I think, continues to give them, some toughness. Danny Green, if he can find his stroke again and be consistent with it, a big asset for them off the bench, especially a guy that can get you some 3 balls off the bench in the middle of the second and middle of the third, middle of the fourth quarter, right? When you're rotating. So I'm gonna trash it only because of the drama with Harden. If they had figured that out and everybody had shook hands and hugged and sang kumbaya before today, I probably would have splashed their offseason slightly. But because of the drama still hanging with Harden, I'm going to trash it, reserving the right to say, oh, yeah, okay, now that they've figured out the Harden thing, they're going to be okay, right?
Yeah.
But until they figure out that Harden thing, I worry that this season could really spin on them with the toxicity that could reside in that locker room.
Yeah, that's fair. The money issue.
It's a little bit of everything. He wants some loyalty from the team.
Mm-hmm.
He wants them to treat him better, I guess. He wants pizza on Fridays.
I think that was debunked.
I know.
I think that was debunked.
Still
funny.
Fun to say though.
Still funny.
What do you think? What does it come down to with Harden?
I have no sourcing to back this up.
Mm-hmm.
I think that he was misled.
Mm-hmm.
He took the pay cut to come back this past season, and I think that they said, we will take care of you. And then he didn't play well in the playoffs. Game 5, 6, 7, right? Yeah, and then they kind of were like, oh, well, it's same old James.
Yeah.
I truly think that he was misled in from a financial aspect, right? Yeah. They were like, you come back, take the cut, we'll get you on the back end.
Yep.
And then they reneged on that.
Yep.
So I think it's a money issue that has spilled over into him not trusting that front office.
Yep.
I don't think he has any issues with the lineup. I believe he likes playing there. I think he likes the guys on that roster. They were a very good team. He played pretty well through the regular season. I don't think it's a basketball issue in Philly. I think it's a front office. He feels misled. He felt betrayed.
Yep.
And now he doesn't want to play there anymore.
Yep. I definitely agree. I think it's that loyalty, that trust that he didn't feel, certainly. And of course, at the root of it is the money concern, right? If he was, in fact, misled on the fact that they would take care of him on the back end.
Yep.
How do you feel about their offseason?
I'm going to trash the offseason. You laid out a lot of good points talking about the drama. That certainly plays a role. I don't love the Trez signing.
I think he's a gritty guy off the end of the bench. He's not gonna be on the floor very often, I don't think, anymore. But
I really like Tubelis. I loved him in college.
Mm-hmm.
I would rather see Tubelis get the minutes than Trez.
That's
But
fair.
whatever. B-Ball Paul is very good. Obviously, it was important to bring him back, especially with Embiid's noted injury history, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's a starting level center in the NBA. Paul Reed is. I like having Danny Green back as well, but the move that I liked the least was signing Nick Nurse to be the coach.
I didn't even mention that. I'm glad you brought it up. I don't like it either.
No, I'm not a Nurse guy. He kind of caught lightning in a bottle with that Toronto team when they landed Kawhi magically, right?
Yeah, that was a pretty ready-made roster.
Yeah, like Pascal is a really, really good second fiddle.
Yep.
To a guy who at the time was challenging Kevin Durant and LeBron for the best player in the world.
Yep.
And Steph, right? Like he was in the conversation with those guys. I mean,
and Van Vliet was at his peak.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and Kyle Lowry was there doing Kyle Lowry stuff,
Yep.
I just don't like Nurse. I think he runs this guy. He's like Thibodeau, right? Like he plays this guy so much they break down, and that is not the coach you need for an Embiid and James Harden team, right?
Yep.
Like it's just not. Now he'll be great with Tyrese Maxey. Maxey's gonna love playing for him. Maxey's gonna play 42 minutes.
He just wants to play 48 minutes a night.
Yeah, it's like
let's go to overtime so I get more.
Yeah, but I trash it mainly for the Nick Nurse reason. The Trez thing I didn't love, but it doesn't move the needle a bunch for me. And then obviously all the James Harden stuff. I mean, it's tough to account for what that does to a team. It's still not resolved, and we're like 3 weeks away from training camp. Like, what are we doing?
Did you catch the Washington game where Josh Harris was in the owner's box and Embiid was sitting next to him? But on the broadcast, they said James Harden is sitting next to him. I was like, oh, no.
Yeah.
Tough. James isn't watching.
That was tough. He's not.
No.
He didn't see that.
He's not. He's at the strip club eating wings, but
him
and Lou will.
Yes. All right. So we both went trash on that one, right?
Yeah.
Good. Let's move down our list one more. None other than a team we've already spoken about tonight, but we're going to do it again. The New York Knickerbockers finished third in the division, made the playoffs. We went 47-35. They have declined a $15 million play option, or $15 million. I didn't write down which it was. I assume it's a team option.
Yeah.
For Derrick Rose. Nobody wants to pay him $15 million. That's why he's in Memphis now. Miles McBride exercised his one-year player option. They gave Josh Hart a 4-year, $80 million deal. They gave Dante DiVincenzo a 4-year, $46 million deal. They traded away Obi Toppin to the Pacers for 2 second-round picks. And the most impactful offseason transaction that the New York Knicks made was that they waived Trevor Keels. Any winning franchise knows that you need to have a Duke star on your roster, and RJ Barrett's not it, all right? 20-year-old Trevor Keels has his whole life in front of him to be an NBA superstar, and someone is going to find that out. I rue the day that teams find out.
The Knicks are going to regret that one.
Yes, they will. What makes it worse is that they waived him on like June 29th. They signed him to a deal on June 4th.
I know.
What are we doing? Projected starters going into next year: Jalen Brunson, Quentin Grimes, RJ Barrett, Julius Randle, and then Mitchell Robinson rounding out your five, playing the center for them. Have I missed any moves that you can think of?
No. I think you hit especially all the big ones, but
yeah, there's some little ones for all these teams.
Small ones, yeah. Dylan Windler. You want to talk about Dylan Windler?
Who?
Yeah, exactly.
So, given everything we've laid out here, splash or trash this offseason?
This is another one like the Sixers. I'm fairly indifferent on the Knicks because I think they really stayed pat for the most part. The Toppin trade, I actually liked that because I think they were still trying to make him something he wasn't. They were still hoping he would be the Naismith winner that he would have been if we'd have played a full season, right? And I know he ended up winning the award anyway, but he would have really showed his ass in the tournament and probably would have been a top 2 or 3 pick if we'd have gone all the way through that March Madness. But they really were trying to get him to be that guy that they thought he was going to be. And I think that detracted a lot from what they really needed to focus on was the growth of Barrett and Randall together. I look at it and say, if I could say neutral, I would for the Knicks, but I'm going to splash this only slightly because I think when you move a guy that your franchise is really focused on trying to make a star out of, and it just isn't working for whatever reason, I think it has a lot to do with coaching with Obi Toppin. I don't think he's a good fit with the style of play. So I think maybe in that Pacers offensive scheme, a little more free-flowing, possibly, maybe he'll be successful. But I just think, like you mentioned it with the Smart trade, you called it addition by subtraction. I say the same thing with Toppin, regardless of the fact that I have a couple of his rookies because I really liked him, and no matter who he got drafted by, I was going to get a couple. But I think that move alone, just now knowing what your roster is going to be until they trade for Giannis, but knowing what your roster is going to be going forward, I think you can focus on making that the best possible starting five, especially that you can have. They stayed pretty pat, kept their own for the most part, minus Keels. Maybe they're going to really regret that. But no, I'm slightly on the side of splash with this, mostly because I do like the move with Toppin, so they can finally say, like, okay, we weren't able to make it work. Let's move on.
Yeah. I agree. I'm going to also splash this offseason. I don't necessarily love the players that they gave money to, but I love them for the fit of the coaching staff.
Yep.
Not a big DiVincenzo guy. I do like Josh Hart. I was never a big Jalen Brunson fan, but he's become a stud in New York playing for Tibbs.
Yeah.
I think that the guys that they brought in are going to play very well in that system.
Yep.
And for that reason, I splash it because that's called roster construction, right? You bring guys in to fit the system that you have.
Yep.
And like you mentioned, Obi Toppin just didn't fit there for whatever reason. Yeah. There ain't no stopping Obi Toppin unless you're Tom Thibodeau, apparently.
Exactly.
But I like the collection of guys they have for the system that they run. And I think they're going to be a really good team again next year. Your dad said it sounds like they went backwards, and they did, for the simple fact that Trevor Keels is not there anymore.
Yeah.
So 1 step forward, 2 steps back kind of deal.
Yep. No, and I think if you're looking at it from the perspective of what they did let walk out the door, via trade and waiving after you sign them to a deal fucking 3 weeks prior. But I think you're absolutely right? The Tibbs system is built for guys like DiVincenzo. It's built for guys like Archie Diacono. They're the gritty Villanova style. They play like Tibbs coaches, sort of like Jay Wright, not as good offensively, but defensively, they're very similar in terms of their approach to, we're going to get in you,
Yeah.
We're gonna be in your hip pocket all day, and we're gonna grind on you defensively. I think those guys fit. I think you're absolutely right. I think that's the perfect way to put it. And combining our two thoughts, maybe they had a great offseason, right?
Who
The
knows?
addition by subtraction with Toppin, and then adding some guys that really fit Tibbs' system. Maybe the Knicks take a step forward this year instead of backward.
All right, so we both splashed the Knicks offseason. We'll go down one more to the Brooklyn Nets. Snuck into the playoffs after trading away Kyrie Irving. Kind of backed their way in, if you want to use a football term. They finished 45-37. They had a pretty eventful offseason here. I'm just going to list off my list is long. All right. So they extended Jacques Vaughn, who they gave the interim head coach position to. They extended him for 4 years. They drafted and signed 3 players. They drafted Noah Clowney out of Alabama at 21 overall. They drafted and signed Dariq Whitehead out of Duke at 22 overall, and they drafted and signed Jalen Wilson out of Kansas at 51 overall, which I think is a steal, in my opinion. So they traded away Joe Harris to Detroit, got off his rather large contract. They traded away Patty Mills. It was a multiple team. He moved a lot, right? But he ended up in Atlanta.
Yeah.
They signed Cam Johnson, Team USA, Cam Johnson out of North Carolina, to a 4-year, $95 million deal. And then they signed Dennis Smith Jr., Lonnie Walker IV, Darius Baisley, Trenton Watford, and, well, those guys all got 1-year deal. But then I'll save his own bullet for himself. Harry Giles, former number 1 recruit coming out of high school in the country, Duke stud, who's been out of the league for 2 years because his knee exploded.
Yeah.
But he's back on a roster, and he's there in Brooklyn. Projected starters going into next year: Dinwiddie, Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, and Nick Claxton. Irving is going to run out of teams to play for. Yeah, probably. He's going to burn every bridge in the league. All 30 of them would be my guess.
He really could. By the time he's done, man. He'll spin all around this flat earth and play for everybody.
All right. Did I miss any? I don't think I did, but can you think of anything I didn't touch on?
Man, they had a busy offseason. You mentioned Armani Brooks.
I did not.
Kind of a roster filler at the end of the roster.
I don't think he'll play.
Yeah, probably not. No, I think you hit them all. All
right, cool. For everything that I laid out there, Gary, give me a splash or a trash.
Man, I'm going to sound like the eternal optimist here because I'm going to splash this offseason. I know it's a mishmash. You already mentioned it's like this big kind of hodgepodge of players. We're just going to throw everybody at the wall. And we're going to hope that, most of them stick and this thing's going to work. But I love the people they brought in. I liked their draft. I thought they drafted well. I love the Lonnie Walker signing. I think he's a guy that can give you solid minutes. I think he started to kind of come into his own with the Lakers. And I think that you've got an opportunity there, especially a guy that was once a highly touted prospect. I think there you've got the potential for some, seizing on some of that, upside. The movement of the Seth Curry and, Joe Harris and, some of those that moved off the roster in terms of Patty Mills, right? You're talking salary moves. That's next offseason, right? That's next offseason. That's the offseason after that. But I like those moves because what you did in this offseason gears you for next offseason, right? Do we have something here or do we not? And I think that's where Brooklyn's at right now because of all of the moves they've tried to make over the last, going back to like the big 3 trade with KG and Paul Pierce pulling those guys away from Boston, going all the way back to that. They've really tried so hard to make this a superstar-laden team in the city of, or in the borough of Brooklyn, and in trying so hard to capitalize on, that superstar mentality, all the way up to like the Durant and Kyrie and James Harden attempt. This feels different than that, but this also feels like a smart offseason for them to say, maybe we've got something or maybe we don't, and we got to go back to the drawing board. They've got a lot of draft capital coming up. So I think that's a thing that's in their favor. If this doesn't work and they end up in the lottery with their own pick, maybe they get another lottery pick with some of that draft capital they've got. and then you start to build, right? This isn't the Vic draft, so they're a year late for, the suck for Vic or whatever you call it.
Yep.
But those lottery picks are valuable, and whether you've got something there and you can move an asset to bring in another star or something along those lines, I liked what they had. And you mentioned Giles with the knee injury. If by some chance that ends up a Sean Livingston-like situation, how good was he for those Dynasty Warriors, right?
He was great.
He was phenomenal. A guy that could take a lot of pressure off the starting guards. He could play with the starting guards. If Harry Giles becomes that level of player, obviously not the same player as a Sean Livingston, but becomes that level of player after that devastating of a knee injury, I think it's a huge signing for them. He was the number one recruit coming out of high school for a reason, right?
Yep.
The guy can play. It's just a matter of health with him. So I'm splashing this. Maybe I'm the eternal optimist thinking that the Nets are making a move here to figure out who they are going forward, but I like that.
Yeah. I can sound like broken record, but I agree with you. I love this offseason, man. I like all three of their draft picks, and Clowney, Whitehead, and Wilson. I was a fan of all of those guys. I've said many times in this podcast that I watch a lot of college basketball, and I view the NBA through the lens of college basketball, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Like I know where a lot of these guys played. I watched them play there, right? I watched a lot of Kansas. I watched obviously a lot of Duke, and I watched a lot of Alabama. I'm a big SEC guy, and there were nights in a world where Brandon Miller was on the court that Clowney was the best player on the floor for both teams.
That's not a joke either, right? That's
he was an extremely good player in Alabama, right?
Yep.
And they got off the Joe Harris money, which I think is big for them because he was injured, didn't play a lot. So he was kind of a nothing in that rotation. It's not a knock on him. That's kind of the way the cards fell, right? He wasn't playing much.
Not playing.
All that, right? You give Cam Johnson 4 years and $100 million. That's a very tradable, movable deal if you want to get off of that. And he's a good player, right?
Right.
Dennis Smith Jr. has kind of worked himself back into being a very good NBA. He's a good NBA player. He's a good rotation guy.
Yep.
He's not nearly as bad, I think, as some people probably remember him being.
I think he gets a bad rap because of how hyped he was coming out of college. Everybody expected him to be like the next, I don't know, like
Derrick Rose.
Maybe the Derrick Rose comparison. I think everybody wanted to watch him dunk on everyone, and that comes at a cost.
Yeah,
when you're a guard, what's he 6'2", 6'3", I think.
Yeah, not very big.
Yeah, I mean, he might even only be like 6 foot 6'1", but when you're a guy that size and you're going in those trees and you're trying to jump over everybody all the time, he can do it. He could do it for a little while, but that comes at a cost. And we saw it happen with Rose. We've seen it happen with several players that. That style of play puts pounding on your body.
Yes, it does. Originally, they were the New Jersey Nets, by the way, not the New York Nets. But
did I say New York?
No. Your dad said that. He asked.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I didn't even see the comment. Yeah, New Jersey.
Jason Kidd, Richard Jefferson, Keith Van Horn.
Yep.
No, Van Horn was a Sixer. Van Horn
was a net at one point.
Was he net? Okay, I thought he was a net. Yeah.
He played for both. He also played for Minnesota.
He bounced.
He moved around a little bit.
But yeah, I agree with what you said about Giles. If he can stay healthy, the dude can ball. He was good. He was very, very good early in his career.
Yeah.
And then he just couldn't stay on the court.
Yeah.
If they could figure that out, good for them. And
you take a chance too, right?
Yes.
Like you're not worse off if he can't play.
Yep.
And it was the same thing with like the Warriors, right? They took a chance on Livingston coming back. He had played a little overseas, but they took a chance on him coming back and it worked out, right?
Yep.
So if you can keep him on the floor, I think it works out for the Nets. There
is one very impactful statement that was made about the Nets that may play a major factor in this upcoming season. It's that Ben Simmons told us he owes the NBA a comeback season. So if you want to jump on the Ben Simmons bandwagon, there is plenty of room. First class tickets for free, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he went on all man in the three. Shout out JJ Redick, and gave one of the most impressive puff pieces I've ever seen from a guy doing it about himself. And then he's like, I'm in the best shape of my career. I owe you guys a comeback. I forget it was comeback or revenge season or whatever it was.
Yeah, something. Yeah.
But golly, dude, like,
didn't we hear last year how he was in the best shape of his life, taking care of his
course.
back and all that?
Of course.
Come on. That's old. Old. Johnny Manziel told us that in 2019 when he was in the fan-controlled football league.
Yeah. Johnny's a legend, though, so no slander here. No, Johnny. We do not stand for that. So far, I think we're 4 for 4. Yes.
Yeah.
I believe we're 4 for 4. We've matched each other. So let's go to the last one, and let's see how we each feel about this, right? The Toronto Raptors. They finished an even 500 last year at 41-41. Notable offseason additions and subtractions. They have a new coach. Obviously, Nick Nurse has transferred in division to Philly. They signed Darko
Radjakovic.
Probably somebody who knows Nikola Jokic.
Yes.
To be their coach. Gary Trent Jr., former Duke star, has exercised a player option for $18 million. They drafted and signed the 13th overall pick, Grady Dick, out of Kansas. They signed Marquise Noel, the darling of March Madness this year, as an undrafted free agent. They also extended Jakob Poeltl, 4 years, $78 million. They signed Jalen McDaniel to a 2-year, $10 million deal, or $9 million deal, excuse me. They signed Dennis Schroeder, MVP of the FIBA World Cup, to a 2-year, $25 million deal. And they also just recently, I believe it was this week, signed Garrett Temple to a 1-year, $3 million deal. Largest subtraction from the team was Fred VanVleet, though. He caught the bag and went to Houston. So good for him. Projected starting lineup.
I got to Texas at the right time.
Yeah. Projected starting lineup for next season. Dennis Schroeder, OG Anunoby, Scotty Barnes, Pascal Siakam, and Jakob Poeltl.
That's a good question for the end. We'll save that for the end.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
So Schroeder, OG, Scotty, Pascal, and Poeltl is your projected starting lineup going into the year next year. Gary, did I miss anything? I don't think so.
Nope.
All right.
Well, you didn't mention Delano Banton left.
Well, that is true. I did mention that he joined somebody else who I forgot already.
Yeah.
Oh, he joined the Celtics.
Yeah.
Okay, so given all of
Ryan
the
would be very upset.
I know. I'm so sorry, Ryan. I apologize sincerely. All right, all the facts laid out in front of us. Splash or trash this offseason?
This one I felt like I could go one of two ways. And I had to kind of wrap my mind around whether I wanted to talk about this offseason as it impacts this year or this offseason as it impacts 2024, 5, 6, and beyond. And I decided I was going to take the same route that I believe the Raptors did with the moves they made this offseason and said, we're not going to be good this year, but we're going to be good in 2024, 25, 26, because I thought they drafted well. I like Grady Dick. I think he's a guy that can get you buckets. I think he's a guy that's pretty versatile on the offensive end, especially. I like the core that they already had in place, and I thought they brought in some pieces that help with that. But for me, it was letting Fred VanVleet get out the door, because if you sign him to the big contract that he was going to get if you re-signed him, then you strap yourself. And I don't think Fred VanVleet is a guy that is a lead piece on a contending team. So you weren't going to build around Fred VanVleet, and the money you would have given him to keep him was possibly going to be untradeable unless the Houston Rockets wanted to trade for him. But that contract would have been hard to trade because of the amount of money he was going to get with the way the CBA works and how contracts work. So I'm going to splash their offseason, but I'm looking at it for 2, 3, 4 years down the road. I'm not looking at it as in 2023-24 that the Raptors are going to compete in the East. We may see them kind of threaten play-in area, and maybe they give somebody a hard time in the playoffs if they're able to get through. They'll be scrappy. I do like the core that they've got there, but I'm splashing this offseason because I like the vision that the front office has for this team going forward.
Sure. This is the same front office that has the fewest amount of roster moves in the last 3 years.
Mhm.
So maybe they're building up steam. I don't know. I am going to trash this offseason.
Yeah.
I was not a huge fan of it. I think that with every passing month, they lose leverage over OG Anunoby's future trade that is eventually upcoming. I think that there was a market last year for Pascal Siakam to be moved through during the season. Those are two guys that I think are
You don't think they're part of the future?
We've seen this song and dance.
Yeah, that's fair. Maybe I'm giving them too much fucking credit.
You laid out a good point though. Like this is you're judging this offseason based off of what they're projecting for next offseason. And I get that. I'm just viewing it through the lens of going into next year, right? This team is not better going into next year than it was going into this year without if you take out Jakob Poeltl makes it better. But I don't think that the team as a whole is going to be better, right? Are you going to play Grady Dick 30 minutes a game as a rookie? Like, is he that kind of guy?
I think you have to.
He wasn't even the best player on his college team.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. It's an upside thing, right? You look at him; he could be a shooter. He could be an elite wing shooter.
Yeah,
that's the projection. I'm not saying he's going to be, but
sure,
that's the projection.
Sure, that's fine.
I think you've really fenced yourself into. He's playing 30 minutes alongside Siakam and Anunoby. I think that's what you're going to see.
Yeah, I mean, but you gave Dennis Schroeder a bunch of money too. Like he's going to play a bunch. I don't know what to expect from this team, right? And they didn't make moves that lead me to believe that they're looking to compete this year, right? Like they signed Jakob Poeltl because they had to, because they traded for him at the deadline last year.
Yeah. Right?
Like that's why you give him all that money is because he's a sunk cost if you let him walk out the door.
Yep.
Yeah, like I've seen Dennis Schroeder in the NBA.
He's not the FIBA MVP in the NBA.
Yeah, like I don't know. Like, okay, you got Dennis Schroeder, cool. Yeah. He's not playing with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Chris Paul next to him, so he's probably not an all-star.
Right.
You know? And maybe I could be totally wrong, and they prove me wrong, and I would love to see that happen for the city of Toronto, right? But I just don't project that to be the case.
Yeah.
So I have to trash it, man. It just wasn't. It was maybe my least favorite of all of these. If they had retained Nick Nurse, I would have liked it even less. but they didn't, so I can't say that.
They went and got Jokic's friend.
Yeah, right, Mr. I don't know, Novak Djokovic's brother, I guess. Who knew that pro sports run in that family?
Yeah, right.
All right, so we'll recap real quick, and then we can do Dad's question. All right. Yeah. So we both went splash for the Celtics. We both went trash for the Sixers for different reasons, but both trashed it. We went splash for the Knicks, even though they did not bring back Trevor Keels. We went splash for the Nets. I think we both really liked the moves that team made, even though we're not sure what to expect from them. Yeah, like I have no feel of what that team is going to be. I just know I like a lot of the guys on that roster.
What's that 8-9 man rotation going to look like?
I don't know, man, but I'm excited to find out.
Right.
And then you splashed and I trashed Toronto for different reasons. Yep. We just viewed it differently, and that's totally fine.
Yeah, and I agree with you completely. They're going to suck this year. I think they're going to be a bad team this year. They're not going to compete. They're probably going to be bottom 5, maybe in the league, top 5 in odds for the draft, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we just looked at it from two different perspectives. I think going forward, if they do decide they're going to move Siakam and Anunoby, they're going to have to find a way to generate buzz and generate value from them.
Yep.
Maybe I'm making a wrong assumption. I think that those two are pieces for this team going forward in the future. But certainly, if they try to trade them, they're gonna struggle. to create enough buzz to get enough out of them to justify that trade, unless you're going to do some sort of sign and trade and be able to make that work. But
right. Yeah, totally fair.
Yeah.
All right.
So my dad's question here to round it up. How do we feel about this division in terms of how difficult it's going to be to compete, maybe in comparison to some of the other divisions in the NBA? What do you think, bud?
All right. So I have the divisions pulled up in front of me. My assumption is that this is the second closest race in division standings next year, only to the Pacific, because you got Sacramento, Phoenix, the Clippers, the Lakers, and the Warriors, and all 5 of those teams want to win a championship. So my assumption is that it's probably the second most contested division in the NBA next season, with 3 teams making the playoffs. Who knows what Brooklyn's going to do?
I think they could get 4 potentially, right? I agree, right? We don't know what to expect with the Knicks, but I think we both like the pieces they went and got.
Yeah,
I would agree with you. The Pacific it's head and shoulders. It's the what we used to know of the NFC East when it was a beast.
Whoa, 7-1, dude. Chill out.
Yeah, we're getting back there, right?
Yeah,
we almost had 4 teams in the playoffs last year.
Giants haven't kicked off yet, so still 7-1.
Exactly. They haven't kicked off yet, so it'll be 7 after tonight. But right now, we're 7-1. Yeah, I agree. The Pacific is a monster. All the every team top to bottom thinks they're going to compete for a championship. This is the next probably closest in terms of you've definitely got 3 teams that are going to compete at the top of this division.
Mm-hmm.
2 that certainly have championship aspirations because of their roster composition and where they've been in the past. If the Knicks can figure out what that starting 5 really feels like, I think they've got a chance, because I do like the talent that's assembled there.
Yeah.
And then the Nets, and then you're going to have the Raptors are what's going to drag this division down for sure. So
yep.
I think competition-wise, it's probably a 2-horse race for winning the division, potentially a 3-horse race if the Knicks can continue with some of the momentum they had at the end of last season.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's probably the right call there. All right. So we've gone and we've given our preview. We've talked about Damian Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo and that soup stuff. We talked about Djokovic's brother. Gary, do you have parting thoughts? Do you have a pick for the game tonight? Actually,
I do. I've got a pretty heavy wager on the Niners to cover 10.5. So
10.5.
It's a big number, but Barkley's out. Andrew Thomas is out.
Mm-hmm.
The Cardinals were up 28-0 before they remembered that they wanted the first pick in the draft. This Giants team is not good. They were outscored 68-0 through their first 6 quarters of the season. Yep. And then the Cardinals, of course, remembered. We want Caleb Williams.
Caleb Williams. Yep.
They weren't going to leave it in Houston's hands to get them that first pick. They want to make sure they got their own first pick. So,
yep.
Yeah, give me the Niners by a lot. What do you think? You got a surprise in you?
So
with the Giants.
So Daniel Jones on Thursday Night Football is 0-3 straight up,
and he's
but 3-0 against the spread.
Oh, that's true. Damn it.
10 is a lot of points.
It is a lot of points.
So I couldn't lay the juice.
Okay.
So I came up with something else.
I like it. Let's get creative.
I came up with something else.
I like it.
I have a 3-leg parlay.
Ooh, same game?
Same game parlay.
Oh, I love it.
I took San Francisco money line, obviously.
Okay.
I took the over at 42.5, which is not adjusted, just the regular over.
Ooh, that's juicy. That's juicy because the Giants, I expect them to struggle offensively, but you got them at least competing.
Give me like a defensive touchdown or something.
Stealing one. Okay.
Yeah, okay. And then I took the Niners over 13.5 points in the first half.
Okay. Hey, I love the creativity, man. I do. That over that's a juicy pick.
Yeah.
Because
I thought about buying a few points. Yeah. I thought about buying down a few points,
Yeah.
But that 3-legger as stands is plus 177, and I was like,
Love it.
I don't really want to drop the odds too much
No.
more, right?
Yeah, you've
Like
been
three
down to,
three legs for
120
less than
or so.
200 is pretty tough.
Yeah.
But I do have a 50% profit boost, so like I'm paying
there you go.
I'm paying out plus 266,
There you
so
go.
like I'm good.
Yeah. Double
So-
down on the creativity.
Yeah,
There
so
you
give
go.
me all the points. Give me all the points early.
Yes. Yes.
And go Niners,
We want the
baby.
Niners in the first half to run them up a little bit. We got to have the Giants keep it close, and we
Give me
got to
like
be in the
20.
20s.
Give me like 28-10 at the end of the first half.
Okay.
And
then
I'll be good to
finish with,
go.
like 28-20.
Yeah, then I just need a touchdown anywhere in the second half. Like,
Yeah. I like it.
yes.
I like it. I like it.
All right. Gary, thank you so much for joining us tonight, man. It's always a pleasure to talk ball with someone
Absolutely.
who doesn't know the divisions by their name, but that's
Thanks.
okay. We'll work on that for next week.
Yeah. Yeah.
All
In
right.
my head, as soon as I said that earlier too in the office, I was like, that ain't fucking right. There's no that ain't fucking right.
That's all right. It's okay. All right, for Gary and myself, thank you all for joining us this evening. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your night. Thank you, Dad. We appreciate the comments and the interaction today. For all of us here at Backyard Buckets, presented by Backyard Sports, we are out.